I would like to dedicate this presentation and this essay to my brother Abbas. He has been a permanent rainbow in my life, a gift of nature in its most sublime form. Thank you, Abbas. So with your permission, since this is kind of new for me, I am trying to be a little creative and combine it with hopefully some scholarship. I'm going to read my essay. In the name of the rainbow, said the 9-year-old Kian Pirfallak before launching his man-made toy boat. The budding poet, who wanted to become a robotic engineer, was shot dead on November 16, 2022, during the Women's Life Freedom Movement. His mourning mother, Khanume Zainab Molai, posted online her son's video. It went viral. Rainbow flags were waved at his funeral. A rainbow adorns his tombstone. The semiotics of the rainbow are rich in Iranian religion, literature, and the arts. Like its occurrence in nature, a rainbow appears at the intersection of opposites. It appears when there is sunshine and raindrops in the sky. Rainbows are also indicative of the arrival of a new era. Like Gorgomish, the break of dawn, it is the promise of the emergence of light when night is at its darkest. Like Shab Yalda, the winter solstice, it celebrates the triumph of light over forces of darkness when night is at its longest. In Zoroastrianism, a rainbow bridge called Chinvad arises at the intersection of life and death. In recent decades, the rainbow flag has become increasingly a symbol of LGBTQ social movements. For the purposes of my presentation tonight, and at a moment when Iran has reached the height of polarization and an inflection point, I'm using the rainbow as a metaphor for a bridge extending across time and space, genres and geography. I'm using it as a trope for the inspiring role of Iranian writers and poets inside and outside the country. If we accept, as we do, at least as I do, that novels know more than the novelist, and poets, or rather poems, know more than the poet, just as dreams always know more than the person who dreams, then this newly emerging body of literary work is the harbinger of the birth of a new era in Iran. In the present word of Forough Farrokhzad, this is not about fearful whispers in the dark. It's about light and open windows and fresh air. It's about everything useless burning in the fire. It's about a field pregnant with a new crop. It's about rebirth and growth and pride. It's about our loving hands building a bridge over darkness and nights. My presentation this evening is made of two interconnected sections. In the multi-rooted walking banyan tree, the borderless geography of Iranian literature, I argue that Iranian writers and poets in Iran and in diaspora are producing a new kind of literature and a new system of expression. This literature portrays fluid identities and multiple perspectives. It is impacted by Iranian and Western literary traditions, but intimidated by neither. Like the rainbow, no walls, no obstacles can restrict its expansive reach. In the concluding section, my second section, titled Mothers, Not Martyrs, a consequential paradigm shift in Iran, I discuss a momentous trend among other innovations by examining the birth of a transformed definition and expectation of motherhood. I consider this the epitome of this new vision of life and its telling. So in part one, I compare the multi-rooted banyan tree to a new category of Iranian writers. What, you might ask, is the relation between banyan trees and Iranian writers? Well, in an article I read on Ruth Praver Jabvala in the New Yorker recently, the author, Maya Jasanoff, compares the work of Jabvala to a banyan tree. She writes, "No intellect can be truly rootless. It always takes hold in the soil of influence and experience. But it is useless to expect writers to be pine trees, lined neatly in a forest, when many are more like banyans, whose dangling aerial roots can make them into a forest of one." I find this one tree forest with multiple roots a powerful metaphor for Iranian literature today. It is an apt comparison of these mobile walking trees with writers who have multiple nationalities and influences, fluid identities and commitments. It's a clever parallel of the tree's outward extending branches and roots to writers who cannot be squeezed within geographic boundaries and man-made borders. Small wonder then if banyan trees are called, in fact, world trees. Literature, as you know, has always disregarded national borders. It has always been in circulation. It has been a voyage and a means of transportation. It has been like a magic carpet, or as Emily Dickinson reminds us, a frigate, a boat, like no other. Literature offers wings to fly with. Perhaps that's why pen and feathers are varieties of the same word, the root being the Sanskrit pat, to fly. Perhaps that's why prison narratives, and unfortunately there are plenty of them, in them, pen becomes a much sought after companion and the means to trespass tall walls and locked doors of the prison. And now, in a rapidly changing world, where traditional borders have become more porous than ever before, writers too are crossing national boundaries and creating a new category of nomadic writers. Writers who, in the words of David Damrosch, are challenging both the European focus on an established canon and the very definition of a masterpiece. Writers who, according to Rabbi Alameddin, a wonderful writer, are both insider and outsider. Alameddin says, I do not know a good writer who feels that she belongs anywhere. That even if she could be a white American in a white American family in Massachusetts or Kentucky, there would still be a part of her that will feel not a part of it. It is the whole conversation that I call the Goldilocks distance. If you are too far from what you're writing about, you can't see it. And if you are too enmeshed in it, you can't see it. So most writers that I know, and he is a very good writer, they're part of their family, but they are really not. They're American, but they aren't really. They have 1 foot in and 1 foot out. A part of you has to be inside and a part of you has to be outside so that you're able to see. And that's what fitting in and not fitting in, belonging and not belonging allows. It is painful, but it allows you to look at things differently. Iran has now a diasporic community all over the world. Iranian literature is no longer limited to works written only in Persian or within the geographic boundaries of the country. Perhaps the very definition of Iranian writer needs to be re-examined. As Bahiyeh Nakhjavani asks in her great novel, Us and Them, the problem is, do artists in the Iranian diaspora still count as Iranian artists? Indeed, how should Nakhjavani herself be identified? What is the right category to use for writers and poets such as Kaveh Akbar, Jasmine Darzanek, Negar Javadi, Jina Nahai, Marjan Satrapi, Solmaz Sharif, Sanaz Tusi, Azarin Vandervliet Olumi, among many others, and most of them prize-winning writers who write in the language of their host countries, but always write about Iran and their Iranian heritage. Perhaps, just as literature could never be squeezed within national borders, a new category of writers can no longer be identified by a single country. In the words of Nakhjavani again, cultural identity is way oversimplified. Frankly, a new mental architecture is required. Certainly, not only a new mental architecture, but also new solutions are required. I often ask myself in despair, why the works of Iranian writers and poets inside the country, inside Iran, have been rather ignored on the global literary scene. Is it at least partly because they are written in Persian? Is this why Iranian cinema and Iranian painting, which rely more on images and less on words, have gained worldwide recognition? Could this explain why the increasingly emerging literary interest in Iranian literature in the world is almost completely directed towards those who have command of the language and their host countries' literary trends? Should we ask why within the last 20 years, 2 Iranian women have won the Nobel Prize in Peace? But in its 122-year history of Nobel Prize in Literature, not a single Iranian, male or female, has been awarded the Nobel Prize in Literature. No doubt, and I'm sure you agree with me, we have had giants, giant figures in modern Persian literature. Why have they not been recognized on the global scene? Perhaps that's why the first international literary prize to an Iranian author was awarded to Emine Pakravan, the mother of Mr. Pakravan, who wrote about Iran, but only in the French language. Pakravan wrote novels, historical biographies, and essays on art and architecture. To the best of my knowledge, she's the first woman professor, to teach at Tehran University. She traveled around the world and discussed Iranian paintings and the arts. She published Persian Destinies in installments in L'Egyptienne, the journal founded by her friend Hoda Sha'rawi in Egypt, and achieved the level of international recognition she richly deserved. She won the prize Rivarol, a prestigious prize, in 1951 in France. Should we ask, would she have been celebrated on the global scene if she had written her books in Persian? Mourning Ravanipur, the author of more than a dozen highly acclaimed novels in Persian, has reached the conclusion that writing in Persian will take her nowhere. Living in the US for the last 3 decades, Ravanipur interrogates the hegemonic domination of the English language. Even if you publish a masterpiece in Persian, she maintains in her recent newsletter, it will not take you anywhere, nor would it earn you a bare living. Ravanipur has a point. No book, no author, no career as a writer can thrive in the US without the tacit approval of the English-speaking literary gatekeepers. The paucity and neglect of literary translations in the multi-billion-dollar American publishing industry is an unfortunate reality. English, as we all know, is the most translated language into worldwide, but one of the least, English is the most translated language worldwide and one of the least translated into. Writers who write in non-Anglo-European languages have a very slim chance to succeed. In a recent poem written in English and titled, I Still Want to Be a Cat, Muniru Ravanipur writes, I went to the Windmill Church and asked the priest, Father, can you teach me talk like a cat? He said, of course, and started training me like a cat. After 1 week, I was really a cat. I couldn't speak anymore. I just said meow. I tried to not say meow like a Persian cat. I didn't want to have an accent. I tried to say meow like an American cat. Here too, Ravanipur has a point. Let us consider for a moment the Nobel Prize in Literature. This much coveted prize that can change the life of the laureate and the country the laureate comes from, has been awarded 116 times to 120 Nobel laureates between 1901 and 2023. As these charts and graphs demonstrates clearly, a non-Western, and my data involves female writers for now, but I think it can pretty much be expanded for male writers, although I have to say there have been a few non-English speaking, non-European male writers have won the prize, but no woman has. Out of the 17 women laureates, now please remember that 120 Nobel laureates are in the world, only 17 are women. Out of the 17, only 2 were from the non-Western world. Gabriela Mistral from Chile wrote in Spanish, a European language, and Nadine Gordimer from South Africa wrote in English, another European language. The 17 female laureates wrote in 8 different European languages. English, of course, was the most dominant one. In other words, all Nobel female laureates wrote in a European language. Sanaz Toussi, born and raised in Southern California, entertains the same complicated reality in her first play, English, that won with great pride, I can say, the Pulitzer Prize just recently in 2023. Toussi, who only writes in English in order to, quote, bridge the gap between my Iranian-ness and my American-ness, admits that I wrote the play English because I was furious with the anti-immigrant rhetoric. I just wanted to scream into the void a little bit. It's a huge thing to learn a different language, a huge thing to give up that ability to fully express yourself, even if you have a full command over language. It is sad, but it is a truism that whereas many governments support the translation of their country's literary works, the Islamic Republic of Iran, which spends colossal amounts of money for the translation of its own version of religious texts, harasses, bans, imprisons, and executes its poets and writers. Perhaps, and I hope, it is the time for the diasporic community to better support the translation, the distribution, and promotion of literary works that are locked up within the Persian-speaking world. So on that happy note, let me switch now to the representation and expectation of motherhood in this recent literature, written both inside and outside the country. In The Origin of Family, Private Property and the State, Friedrich Engels writes with truly impeccable precision that the overthrow of mother right was the world historic defeat of the female sex. The man took command in the home also. The woman was degraded and reduced to servitude. she became the slave of his lust and the mere instrument for the production of children. In Iran, motherhood has been considered sacred and exalted in religions, myths, and legends. For centuries, undivided motherly love and unadulterated devotion to her children was a woman's destiny and a common trope in more than 1,000 years of a glorious literary tradition. A woman's rights and interests were neglected in favor of a mythologized motherhood. At the height of her global success as a writer, and with her customary candor and courage, Marjan Satrapi discusses the cage of restrictive definitions of womanhood. When I turned 30, and in all the interviews, that's after the great success of Persepolis, I was asked, "Do you have a child?" No. And then again, "Do you have a child?" No. Why don't you have a child? Well, because I don't want to be anybody's mother. But as a woman, I have to justify myself all the time. And if I want to say, I want to dedicate my life to my work, I am called an ambitious bitch. They never do that to a man, never. Now, Simin Daneshvar has recreated with stomach-churning precision the pressure of becoming a mother and the consequences of barrenness for women. Her short story, The Man and the Snake, revolves around a young woman named Nasrin, who, like Simin Daneshvar herself, is held responsible without proof of sterility. Nasrin's parents, her in-laws, her well-meaning friends, her neighbors, her relatives, her classmates, all want to know why she has not started a family. Tormented by her own inflamed emotions, beleaguered by people's remarks and downright cruelties, she subjects herself to ordinary and out of the ordinary cures. When all fertility treatments fail, she considers adoption. And in fact, she manages to arrange for the adoption of the baby of an unwed but pregnant princess. After all the papers were in order and everything was taken care of, the husband reneges and opposes the plan altogether. As a last resort, a frustrated Nasrin goes on pilgrimage to the shrine city of Mashhad. On the way, she meets a gypsy who tells her she has the perfect remedy for her infertility. She hands Nasrin a bizarre, fluffy-looking medication with the instruction on how to use it and insert it in herself. Sure enough, Nasrin gets pregnant and amidst great jubilation carries the baby to full term. But the much-awaited biological child delivers an unexpected tragedy. Nasrin gives birth to a snake. And the short story ends with the mother and father carrying the snake in a cage home. Daneshvar's short story, minus the birth of a snake, is reproduced with remarkable resemblance in her husband's autobiography, Sangi bar Guri, a tombstone on a tomb by Jalal al-Ahmad. In this short book, al-Ahmad grieves for a child he never had. Considering the ability to procreate central to his definition of masculinity, even of his virility, he sees the failure to have a child, preferably a son, a real tragedy. But adoption is out of question for him, although the wife has arranged again to adopt the child of a princess, not married, but pregnant. So, lest his name and memory not be carried into the future, like a tombstone on a tomb, he resolves to father a child of his own, no matter what the price. He makes his wife, who has not been established, is the sterile one, go through long ordeals of diagnostic, testing, consultation with experts, emotionally and physically draining medical procedures. He even begins an affair while traveling in Europe with a European woman, but only and presumably to end his childlessness. All his efforts end in failure. Al-Ahmad never published the book during his lifetime. It was published posthumously. In spite of all this, and even though motherhood is sacralized as an institution in Iran, it is not a right for women. Legal fatherhood is a right. Motherhood is a privilege. To remain a mother, a woman has to follow a stringent code of conduct. She has to earn motherhood. The life of Forough Farrokhzad is a case in point. This iconic poet chronicled the tangled emotion of a mother at war with herself and with the society of her time. She titled her first poetry collection, Prisoner, Asir, and bemoaned the heavy chain of traditional notions of motherhood around her restless feet. If I wish to fly out of this dark, dank cell, what can I say to my weeping child? Oh, let me be. I am a prisoner. I am a caged bird. Torn between creativity and domesticity, the young poet eventually broke with conventional definitions of motherhood and forged ahead. However, deemed a failure as a mother, she was denied even visitation rights with her child, except for a short few minutes in front of Kamyar's school. Her son, the two never met in person in the last 10 years of her short life. The pain of this separation is the central trope of Farzaneh's poetry. There is not a single photograph of mother and child in the last 10 years of her life. Farzaneh's biological child, Kamyar, also suffered. He suffered from the cruel separation imposed on him and his mother. But with much chagrin and implied disapproval, he lamented the fact in an interview with me that his mother ultimately chose to become a poet and left him. In her novel, The Woman Who Read Too Much, Nakhjavani gives voice to the regrets of the daughter of another truly pioneering woman, Tahireh Qurratulain. She writes, "Sometimes the daughter of the poetess wished that her mother were more like all the other women in the family. She wished that she were more normal, less vocal. She wished she would do more sewing than reading, less studying than cooking." Surely, hard-won and important gains were made in pre-revolutionary Iran, such as the family protection law. The clerical regime, however, wanted to reverse all gains, and its agenda, one of its most important agenda, was to re-establish the patriarchal family. White Torture, Narges Mohammadi's impactful book with blood-curdling, spine-chilling interviews with political prisoners who have experienced solitary confinement, abounds in accounts of mothers who are led to believe they're not good mothers by their interrogators. Have I gone beyond the time? No. It is replete with the anguished uncertainty of mothers about how their children cope with their activism and how they will judge their mothers. This merciless pain reverberates over and over again in the interviews in these two books. In White Torture, we read detailed description of unbounded violence. We witness the brutalities of interrogators who beat and maim, harass and humiliate. We cringe with horror at squalid conditions and the great deal of aggression set loose upon political prisoners. The interviewees, both male and female, talk about being blindfolded, slapped, beaten, dragged to interrogation in the middle of the night. They cite unbearable suffering, insomnia, depression, panic attacks, accelerated aging, suicidal thoughts. They bemoan being disconnected from the social world and caged in a space with no natural darkness and no natural light. However, in this frightening world, mothers have an added disadvantage. In almost every interview with a mother, she will discuss her intolerable anxiety about the welfare of her child or children and her own guilty feelings towards them. And the interrogators fully invest in this perceived vulnerability of women. They pathologize any aberration from traditional motherhood. Spare these women no agony. Blame them for leaving their helpless children motherless. But the scene on December 10, 2023, at the Nobel Ceremony for Peace, captures with poetic justice the failure of the Islamic Republic of Iran to remake the country in the image of its own choosing. Although Mohammadi was not allowed to leave the prison and receive her award, her words and her unveiled image sprouted wings and flew all over the world. With a rope made from courage, the laureate pulled herself up from the depth of darkness from behind the tall walls of Evin prison. Knowing the consequences but not fearing them, Mohammadi not only desegregated herself on the global scene, but also redefined motherhood. She overcame absence and erasure with boundary-pushing words delivered with fascinating grace by her young daughter and son, who had been separated from her for 8 years. And this was the choice of Narges Mohammadi, to send her children to Paris to be with their fathers. In a way, I think she freed motherhood from being a hostage in the hands of professional hostage takers. Once sharing a womb, a dazzling 17-year-old twin brother and sister shared the world stage to accept the much coveted prize on behalf of their incarcerated mother. Although separated from her since they were 9, Ali and Kiana expressed their love for a mother with multiple identities and commitments. A mother who has defied singleness of commitment. A mother who has redefined maternal care. In an interview posted on the Nobel Prize website, Kiana said, "I have never blamed my mother. She's an incredible woman and an incredible mother." And it's important, when one says an incredible woman, one must also specify an incredible mother. because my mother is both. I respect her as a mother and as an activist. We all understand and respect her choices. This solidarity, this expression of filial love towards a mother with multiple identities and commitments, even if it has meant long and painful years of separation, is emerging only recently as an integral part of the public discourse on mothering. Jina Nahai's beautifully written and highly celebrated book, Moonlight on the Avenue of Fate, which is beautiful, truly beautiful, and about the Jewish community in Iran, and Simin Behbahani's Ba Madaram Hamrah, accompanied by my mother, are other examples of these emerging subgenres. But Kaveh Akbar's stunning debut novel, Martyr, is another case in point. Martyr is an elegy of a grieving son for his departed mother. It is prose poetry and prayer combined. Akbar celebrates a new mother-child relationship in his novel. He celebrates a mother who does not sacrifice her art and her talent for the sake of a son she dearly loves. He also celebrates a son who recalibrates his expectation from mothering and motherhood. Cyrus felt angry for himself, then at himself for feeling angry instead of something more enlightened, such as acceptance or perhaps compassion. Cyrus found himself praying suddenly without even realizing it. The anger he felt at his mother, the vanished, the abandoner, but also the pride for her now, the great artist. To conclude, what we are witnessing at this incisive moment in Iran is the birth of a new order. This is not only about politics or religion. It is an existential struggle. It is about gendered and generational changes unfolding at every level in the society and in every family in the country. It's about two ways of life, two different worldviews, two different definitions of masculinity and femininity, and most importantly, two definitely different forms of familial systems. On the one hand is a regime intent on restricting people's, in particular women's, human rights and human dignity. On the other side is an inspiring, globally resonant movement led by women and supported for the first time in Iranian history by an unprecedented number of men. They challenge authoritarianism, exclusionary policies, and segregationist agenda. This uprising, this movement, this rebirth, this revolution, regardless of what it is called, defies easy categorization and labels. Like the rainbow, it builds a bridge connecting women and men, young and old, center and periphery. It spreads out with a multiplicity of colors, basks in its nimble fluidity, pushes boundaries, expands frontiers, and offers new and alternative possibilities. It does not commerce in either-or propositions. Its worldview is capacious enough, big enough, diverse enough to accommodate the conjunction and to fight the desire to confine life within binary opposites. In the precious words of Mandana Zandian, a doctor, a writer, and a poet, winters, nights, and clouds are as precious and as endearing in my poetry as is spring, daybreak, and light. If the Islamic Republic of Iran erected curtains to isolate the country and sequester its population, the young women and men on the streets of Iran are replacing them with bridges. If the clerical regime wanted to reintroduce segregation into nearly every aspect of women's lives, the country is experiencing a mass exodus of women from inside to outside the home and the country. If the Islamic Republic institutionalized mendacity and corruption, Iranians are fighting for the liberty not to lie. And what a big liberty that is. In her interview with the New York Times, Zar Ebrahimi, winner of Best Actress Award at Cannes Film Festival in 2022, said, "We can't be controlled by them anymore. We can't hide ourselves and play this game. We grew up learning how to lie, lying inside to our parents that we didn't meet someone outside, lying outside that we didn't party inside." In the visionary words of dear Simin Behbahani, a rainbow catcher, a creator of a rainbow universe, who, like Kian Pirfallak, invokes the goddess of rainbow in a beautiful poem titled Walls Within Walls. "You have erected walls after walls to enclose me. One day, I will escape this onion-like confinement. Like a mirror held to the rainbow, I will adorn my face with 7 colors. I will scatter blue petals in the wind. I will let my silk scarf flutter in abandon. I will praise Iris, the goddess of rainbow in the mountains. I will find myself suddenly in full bloom, and you are doomed to rot." Standing at the threshold of East and West, of the local and the global. Iranian writers and poets, inside and outside the country, are creating a new map of Iran, a territory beyond national borders, beyond binary understanding of time and space and identity, beyond either-or propositions, and respectful of and as a conjunction. They are creating a rainbow bridge, connecting here and there, us and them, now and then. To borrow from Judy Garland in The Wizard of Oz, and one of the absolute best-known songs in movie history, Somewhere Over the Rainbow, way up high, there is a land that I heard of once in a lullaby. Somewhere over the rainbow, skies are blue, and the dreams that you dare to dream really do come true. In the hopes that the dreams we Iranians have dared to dream, the triumph of non-binary imagination over absolutism and fanaticism, of democracy over theocratic tyranny, of integration over segregation, we can be sure our dreams will finally come true. And I hope that Iranian writers and poets will continue to play a crucial role in shaping Iran's future. Thank you for your patience. I think if you have questions, and sure.
You know, this problem of Iran, women in Iran, is not really confined to Iran. It's all over the Middle East. And the quotations that you have from Engels, I think it's related to capitalism, that obviously it's applicable to Iran as well. But I think we need to look at it in a more global way than what is the problem. I think part of it is Islam, but also Islam works in some other countries like Indonesia, probably, or Turkey. But it doesn't work in Afghanistan, it doesn't work in Iran, it doesn't work in Iraq, even it doesn't work in the Persian kingdoms, like Dubai and other places, in one form or the other. So I think if you just say that this rainbow problem is the problem of Islamic Republic, I think we are just narrowing your view. That's my...
You're absolutely right, and I hope I didn't say that. The subject of my talk was Iran, so I confined myself to Iran, but you're absolutely right. There is a world movement, and many people before me, Gloria Steinem, for instance, decades ago said what we're seeing and what we will see in the future is the decades for women, of women. So you're absolutely right. This is a global movement. But I also find it fascinating that whereas up to maybe even a few years ago, the representation of Iranian women in the West was that of a voiceless, powerless, immobilized women. With this women life freedom movement, not only the image has changed, Iranian women have come to inspire the world. And this is something to be proud of. This is something to talk about. And also to mention that it is so not because it just happened recently. If the women's movement in the world is often traced back to 1848 and the Seneca Falls Convention, we had something very similar to the Seneca Falls Convention in Iran. In 1848, a woman, a religious scholar, but also a poet, appeared unveiled in front of a congregation of 81 men and gave body to her voice and voice to her body. She unveiled her face and started addressing a congregation of 81 men. As you can expect, the congregation was set in commotion. Somebody wanted to kill her. Somebody were so upset that closed her eyes not to see. Others shut their ears not to hear her voice. One man, one Abdul Khaliq Isfahani, and these are historic facts, was so distraught, was so disoriented by the presence of this unveiled, voiced women in the midst of this gathering that he cut his own throat and splattered with blood. He left the premises of Badasht and the pages of Iranian history. I've been very interested in his life. I understand his disorientation. It's not easy, and segregation impacts everyone. Segregation impacts men and women. I can't find much on his life. So, women's movement in Iran goes back to 1848. And we need to be very proud of that history and explain that what's happening in Iran did not happen overnight, as it never can.
Iran is made up of a lot of different ethnic groups. It's not a very homogenous country.
Right.
I wonder if you can speak to kind of how historically it's been a place of different identities, maybe competing identities, and how that might have been expressed in the past.
Yes. Yesterday for lunch, I had the great honor, the great pleasure to be in the company of my brother and Qumars Khan, and he was talking about a book and, that you're writing about how old. Please correct me if I misunderstood you.
Master level in John's book, The Persians, The Age of Great Kings, which was published recently. And it opens with an introduction in which it explains the use of the multicultural for the first time in the Biston inscription. And the word in Old Persian is Bista Zaban, which means multicultural, or several languages, because the king was proud that his empire consisted of people who speak different languages.
So even that is very old. And yes.
Yes, thank you so much, Professor Milani, for this fantastic talk. I absolutely appreciated your deep dive into the narratives and the complexities of motherhood that are coming out. This is something that I feel the Iranian culture is very much still struggling with. And in particular, I think the examples of Kiana and Ali was very interesting. As a mother and as a scholar, I was following very closely what was being said about the children and about her. And I came across of that, what a long road we still have to
Right.
be able to talk about the complexities
Yes.
of guilt,
Yes.
shame.
Yes.
In fact, I came across narratives where the children were saying, we didn't know her, we didn't know that she was our mother.
Correct.
And so I wanted to hear a little bit more of your sense. Do you feel that, as you portrayed, which I think is a very hopeful image, do you feel that work is being done to talk about the complexities of
Yes.
femininity and motherhood the same way we think about the complexities of fatherhood and masculinity?
Yeah.
Or do you still feel like, what
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for your overly kind words and for this fantastic question. I remember it was on a Sunday, I think. I woke up a couple of hours in advance. I live in Virginia, and I wanted to watch the whole thing. And for a good part of it, I was crying. And I started thinking about what was about that scene that made me cry. And I had been reading, because I had just finished reading Torture, which I'm grateful my brother Abbas had given to me the books. And I couldn't put the book down. I have to say, White Torture is one of the most impactful books. I say books because it's 2 volumes. I have read in the last 10 years. I really couldn't put it down. As I said, it's blood-curdling. Can people be so cruel on other innocent people whose only crime is to want democracy? But putting that aside, I think I've read pretty much most of the interviews of Ali and Kiana, especially Ali first and Kiana later. At the beginning, she was more silent, but she had. And, to me, the fact that she and her brother can acknowledge the difficulties of being separated from their mother, but also admire it. Acknowledge that it was her right, it was her choice to be an activist. My feeling is that Narges Mohammadi would have not been able to do what she did if she had kept the children, because they would have been the hostages. So this capacity of 2 17-year-olds to hold ambiguities and tensions in them, I see it as a very positive sign. I would have been surprised if they would have forgotten all the difficulties. They suffered, there is no doubt about that, but they're not willing to blame the mother. In every interview that I have read, and I think I've read all the Persian, French, and English interviews, I have not come across any interview that either the son or the brother has blamed the mother. They've talked about the difficulties of separation. In one interview, I think it's Kiana, who says, I don't even remember the voice of my mother. I don't remember the texture of her hair, because she kept touching my hair. And, she's justified in saying that. She's truthful. She's honest. But she's also not blaming the mother. She says specifically, I'm not blaming her for her choices. Now, one can say, well, the mother at this point is the Nobel laureate. It's easier to do that. But then I gave you an example of other books. I specifically did that, both for myself and for the kind audience, to know that it was not because she was a Nobel laureate. Kaveh Akbar, in his book, which is an absolute masterpiece. If you have not read that book, may I suggest, I don't know Mr. Akbar, but I love his poetry, and I absolutely love this book. Martyr is the name. It has two narrators, a man and a woman, and the second narrator is a woman, the mother, the abandoner, the vanquisher. The best lines in the book, the most glorified character in the book is the mother. Gina Nahai in Moonlight on the Avenue of Faith, which is the story of a Jewish mother and daughter, is another masterpiece. It's really very complex, very textured, nuanced discussion of motherhood, of daughterhood, but also of the birth of a text as a form of procreation, which I find fascinating. And then Simin Behbahani has written about her mother, با مادرم همراه, in which she totally justifies a mother back then, who was a professional, who was a poet, who was an activist, who did all sorts of things. And I can give you other examples. Okay. Yes.
Thank you for your beautiful talk. I was struck when you mentioned that there needs to be translation of
Yes.
literature that's written in Persian.
Yes.
And so I'm curious whether you think also that the literature that is written in diaspora is different from the literature that's written in Persian. Just because languages sometimes determine
Yes.
what you can say and how you
Yes.
say it. So I'm just curious if
Yes.
we're missing, like those of us who can't read it, or missing out on
Right.
these stylistic
Yes.
and
Yeah.
thematic qualities.
Thank you for this wonderful question. We can talk about the last 45 years of Iranian literature as a whole, because it's not. In the early years of the revolution, Iranians who left Iran were separated from inside the country. Those who were inside the country were separated from the diasporic community. I really feel bad for the generation of writers that were in their middle ages at the time of the revolution. They suffered a lot, and their works have not been given due recognition. But then things began to change. Iranians started writing more and more in diaspora, and a renaissance has really happened, not because of, but in spite of the Islamic Revolution in Iranian literature, in particular women's writing. So what I was saying, this capacity to hold opposites in your mind, this rejection of the need to say either or, it's either good or bad, either black or white, either, this either or, it's happening in Iran too. This movement from the periphery to the center and from the center to the periphery is happening too. So some of the more recent work coming out of Iran are really surprising. I don't know if any of you have read the work of Mahsa Mohebali, for instance. In fact, it has been translated. One of her books have been translated by a fantastic Iranian translator. And we're beginning to have more and more great translators. Dick Davis, who is a scholar, but also an impeccable translator. Maryam Rahmani, who has translated Mahsa Moheb Ali, and several others. I can't enumerate all of them. Things are beginning to change. But we really need to translate these works more, to expose the world not only to what's happening in Iran, because as you remember, when life, Zan Zendegi Azadi happened, there at the beginning stages, there were a lot of surprises. People first, who are these women? Because Iranian women have become inspiration for the world. A friend sent me the Swedish soccer team, and every player had on her jersey something really nice about Iranian girls. Just a couple of days ago, I don't know exactly when it happened, but it's very recently. I mean, Iranian women have become, and as a feminist, I want to emphasize and say Iranian men too, those who support Iranian women, who are called Zizi, Zanzalil, you know, a number of books have been written in the last couple of decades. At least I have read 4 of them with Zanzalil in their title. These are men who support women, who believe in a new definition of masculinity, femininity, and motherhood and fatherhood. So these young men also should be praised, should be celebrated on the global stage. And the fact that these people are very young, it's really wonderful. And to go back to your wonderful question, that movement is also a global movement. The youth becoming more and more active and at the forefront of social movements. Yes, ma'am.
I really liked your point about how segregation affects everybody. And so I'm really thinking about the women in Iran who still believe that their only role is motherhood, and that is the role that they should take on. The women who are not a part of the oppositional movement. I'm thinking, I guess my question is, how do we go about fostering feminism in Iran that looks different and can include the women who's right now maybe see themselves outside of it? And how do you see that playing out? Because I do think there's a lot of women who still aren't ready to be a part of the movement.
I'm sorry. Would you kindly elaborate a little bit so that I better understand your question?
How do we go about fostering feminism in Iran? Or do you see this
Who is we and who is them?
in the diaspora?
Okay.
I guess what is our role? And also within Iran, do you see that fostering happening, and how do you fit those women
Right.
who might tear down women who aren't loud and speak up? How do you fit that into this image?
Right. Feminism and segregation, of course, are 2 different issues, right? Although, for me, I think segregation in Iran has been and will be at the core of modernity, of desegregation, of feminism, of liberation of men and women. A lot has been written about, by women often, about how difficult it was for men to be desegregated. Badr Muluk Bamdad, has a wonderful book. It's her personal experience, her memoir, and it has also been translated into English about the years of the Pahlavi era. And she has a scene that, to me, speaks volume, and perhaps that will answer your question about segregation, and then I will answer your second question. She said when finally women and men had a university, I think it was 1936, right? Tehran University opened, which is fantastic. When women were admitted, I think there were 11 the first year. And she says that somehow, every time the 11 of us were sitting in one corner and around us was empty. You know, natural segregation. In some Iranian parties, we still see that. You know, naturally, we are just attracted to, and you know, it's decades and centuries of segregation. So, so segregation is difficult on both men and women, although, and for women, I can refer you to pictures of the early women who unveiled themselves. Look at how uncomfortable they are with their bodies. You know, they're cringing in themselves. They want to take as little space as possible. They don't want to expose themselves to the eyes of the other and all that. Now, regarding feminism in Iran, you know, there is not one form of feminism. As you know, there are many different forms of feminism. So it depends on what we're talking. What I see happening is that it is spreading more and more. You know, let me give you an example of something I know best, at least better than the other thing, which is literature. You know, for the first time in Iranian history that I know of, we have fantastic writers, women writers, who are from the periphery, who are from villages, who are from Tabriz, for instance. I'm thinking of Fariba Wafi, who is truly a great writer. And she was invited here, and she gave a lecture here, I remember. Fariba Wafi comes from, she said it herself in her writing, I'm not divulging any secret, from a working class family. She lived in Turkey, in Tabriz. And then she moved to to Tehran at some point, and now, of course, she's in Germany. She has left Iran. And she's not the only one. So there is this movement. And to me, freedom of movement is at the core of segregation and desegregation. Okay. I hope I answered your question. I tried.
But I am just, thank you so much for fascinating talk. I'm just wondering that are we in this position to teach them feminists? Because I feel that Iranian women in Iran are more open than here. Even at Stanford, as a woman, when I talk loud, I see people react. They want to silence me down when I talk about Islam, especially,
Yes, yeah.
and attack Islam.
Yes.
I feel that like people here cannot tolerate women. I see women in Iran are dancing without the hijab in the street.
Yes.
They're much more open than many people inside of the Stanford.
You're absolutely right. That's why they've become the inspiration of the world. That's why Swedish soccer players have the sign on their jerseys. You're absolutely right. It is an inspiration. I know it has been an inspiration to me. I know for decades I've written about how the image of women, Iranian women, in the West, not only in the US, but also in Europe, although I have to say, to a lesser extent, does not fit the reality. To just end on a personal note, and my brother is here, one of the reasons I got interested in feminism 50 years ago was because the few available articles, and there weren't too many books available, about Iranian women did not match at all what I knew about my mother, my grandmother. Abbas has written about my mother. I love one of his stories about my mother, begins so beautifully. مادر من شیرزنی بود. My mother was a lioness of a woman. And I love that. It's true, she was. So you're absolutely right. Thank you.
And you are a shirzan.
Thank you.